Hello. Welcome
Hello.
to my guest 12 of 24 of the podcast. We're halfway there, Lee. We're halfway there.
Amazing.
Welcome, Leigh Otterson Walter. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much.
It's
I'm very
amazing.
excited.
It's so great to have you on. So thank you for kind of. We've obviously got to know each other over the last few months. We was working with Freedom Works and in that space, and amazing. And listening to some of the stuff that you've done was fascinating. So great to have you on and have this conversation. So look, we're gonna jump straight in, tell listeners a little bit about your story and your career.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's exciting. I've been following your podcast for quite a long time now, and I enjoy listening to the stories that people share with you. So, big breath. My story is that I was born in South Africa, and I lived there until I was 19. So life in South Africa was tricky. It was during the apartheid era when I was born. So growing up, it was a difficult place to be. There were lots of things that were going on around that sat very uncomfortably with me, even as a very young child. My family life wasn't brilliant. It was often, we were poor. So there was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of alcoholism. There was a lot of, it was very unsettled, I think, for most of it. My childhood wasn't an amazing experience. So by the time I was 16, I left home and I moved out. And by the time I was 19, I left the country and I came to England. And initially it was, my own. So I worked, I think the year between 18 and sort of 19, I worked in a restaurant for hours and hours and hours every week to save up money. And eventually I had enough money to buy a plane ticket. And that was it. I packed my backpack and got on a plane and arrived in England. So I left South Africa. It was 35 degrees. I got off the plane. It was 3 degrees. I'd never been at 3 degrees before. So a shock.
What was your relationship with your parents at that time? What did they think about you getting up?
I mean, by that stage, I lived on my own for the last 3 years. So when I left home, it was a difficult relationship. I never really had a particularly positive relationship with my parents. There was a lot of neglect in childhood. A lot of my childhood I don't remember. There are sort of huge chunks of it that I've just completely kind of blocked out of my memory. It was nothing really. There wasn't a conversation about it. That was my, what I wanted to do next with my life. And so I did it, and arrived in England, and it was scary and exciting. And, it's like I'd seen it so much on TV before, and you've seen images of, Piccadilly Circus, and then coming out of the underground station and standing in front of this building that you've seen on TV for years was incredible. So that's kind of where it started.
It's a brave thing to do at 19 years old to leave the country, don't it? And did you have people in the UK that you knew, or?
So yes and no. I have two brothers, and one is 11 years older than me. The other one is 14 years older than me. And I hadn't seen both of them since I was about 8. So by the time I was 8, they'd both left the house and left the country. And so one of my brothers was living in Brighton at the time, and I hadn't seen him. So I think I was 8 or 9 the last time I saw him. And then I turned up as a 19-year-old on his doorstep and was sort of, hi, I'm here to stay. And it took about 5 years for us to get to know each other as adults. I didn't live with him for the whole of the 5 years. I stayed with him for about 3 months, but it was an interesting time because we had to get to know each other as strangers. We were related by blood, but we had no history together.
Yeah. Well, so talk to them about, I guess, career-wise and stuff. So you've come over to, wherever did you go into then, and talk to me a little bit about that and work-wise from that period.
So my first job in England was working in a factory in Hove. And that was, I think it's something I will never, ever forget. It was the most difficult job I've ever done, purely from a kind of boredom factor. So I remember I was working on an assembly line and putting together circuit boards. And it was, I think, 8 or 9 hours a day of literally a repetitive movement of putting tiny little pieces into a green board. And I remember having to, when I went to the loo, sort of trying to make it last a whole 5 minutes in the toilet, just so that was 5 minutes that I didn't have to be sitting at that, at that desk doing that job. So that was tricky. So I did that for about 3 months just to save up some money. And then I moved up to London and I started working in Harrods.
Okay.
And for me, I think if I look back, that was the beginning of, I think, the making of me in terms of customer service. So where I learned to really, really understand your customer, what it is that they want, how they want to be spoken to, how they want to be served, what's important to them, and about creating a customer experience, not just fulfilling a function.
Yeah, sure. And so how long was you there at Harrods for?
So I was there for probably 2.5, nearly 3 years in total. But after about 6 months, I applied for a position on a management training program in Harrods. And there was, I think, 2,000 applicants, and they selected 4 people, and I was one of the 4. So it was catering, management, and corporate hospitality. And so over a period of about a year, I got to work in every single department in Harrods, which was amazing. But also work with top chefs from all over the world, amazing mentors. And it's such an interesting place to work in terms of the history and just the clientele that they have. There's so much secrecy around how they run the business, and it was a great place to learn. They had at the time, I think, 17 restaurants. So I worked in all of the restaurants, in every single, position within the restaurant, so I could learn the business as a whole. And then after a year, I was done with my course, and it was, time to move on.
Yeah. Like, growing up then, obviously, we've been a difficult trial, but had you had any sort of ambitions, or what was your thought process about what I want to do growing up? Was there anything that you had in mind that you really wanted to do? Or?
No. So I think growing up, it was a funny thing because we never talked about the future in my house ever. So there was never any discussion about plans, even, in 3 months' time, let alone in a year's time or when you're older. There was never any hope for anything else. Life was always very difficult, both financially and emotionally. And so we never really talked about it. And so for me, I didn't have anything to aspire to. And even if I did, there was no point in talking about it anyway, because nobody was interested. So for me, it was about getting out. That was my initial motivation, getting out of that environment and creating a life for myself somewhere else. And then that just kind of continued throughout my sort of late teens and into my 20s. It was all about making a better life for me.
Yeah, I love that. I want to move on to talking about, obviously, something we both share, obviously, a real passion for is building communities. So talk to me about, I want to obviously fast forward a little bit and talk a little bit about the inspiration behind Worthy Mums and Dads that you launched in 2012. Talk to me about that.
So 2012, I had 3 very young children. I had, nearly a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And my husband worked for the emergency services at the time, and so he was working horrific shifts. And it was lonely. It was really, really lonely. It was overwhelming to have 3 kids, 3 young children.
Sure.
My daughter, it's interesting because when you were talking about Luca earlier and his story, so my daughter does have cerebral palsy. And whilst she, there's a spectrum, isn't there? And some children have many, many challenges, very difficult, life-changing challenges, and some children are mildly affected. I'm lucky that she's mildly affected, or she's lucky that she's mildly affected in that she doesn't have any physical disabilities. But when she was born, everything seemed fine. The birth was a difficult birth, and she was born by emergency cesarean as well. So when I heard your story earlier, it kind of brought back a lot of those memories for me. But we didn't know early on. So it's only kind of as she was reaching different milestones, or supposed to be reaching different milestones in her early childhood, that we noticed that she wasn't. And so she was diagnosed when she was 3 with hemiplegia. And that, what resulted from that was her needing to have a lot of input from physiotherapists, from occupational therapists, from speech and language therapists. And it was lonely. It was a really lonely journey. I didn't have parents around to support me. We didn't have a network of people that we could rely on to say, can you pick the kids up from school, or can you pick the kids up from nursery? So Worthy Mums and Dads was born out of a need for a community, for a tribe of people where I could go, even if it wasn't in real life, just to say, I'm having a really tough day today as a parent, or, has anyone else experienced this? Or I'm feeling this, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling isolated, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And having a tribe of people who could really relate to that and offer support in a very non-judgmental environment. So it started with about 5 people, and now we're a community of about just over 20,000.
Wow, that is a phenomenal statistic. What's fascinating actually listening to that around I guess for a lot of people I've sort of spoke to, and you heard me obviously speaking earlier with Charles about entrepreneurs and business owners or whatever it is, that ultimately a lot of things are born out of having a problem and trying to find a solution for that problem, and listening to that, like building a community from something you just want to reach out and need people around you to, and like I said, that passion we both share for community, I guess is that certainly, I guess, out of lockdown as well, like we realised that we need to be around people and we need people in us. It's such a valuable thing, but I'd like to start that from that small thing, and it's at the start where there was just sort of 5 of you, but that gave you what you needed in relation to support.
It really did, because I was really isolated, and I think when you know what it's like when your kids are little, and whilst I didn't have twins, you have twins, but having 3 so close together, I had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn, all at the same time. And at the same time, my husband started working away from home up in northeast London, so he was away probably 4 days a week, and he'd stay overnight. So it was just me and the kids, and it was lonely. And I think that was what I needed. I built the community because that's what I needed. I needed people to be there for me, but also I wanted to be there for other people who might have been experiencing isolation as well.
Yeah, and I think, again, you sort of reach out and actually being able to, firstly, be brave enough to go, I'll set this up because, for whatever reason, because I'm just looking for support, and look at the whole vulnerability and people being able to communicate a little bit better and be able to show vulnerability, and that it's not weakness, it's just, and because I can imagine, I even see it like sometimes with Kelly's a very honest person, and but on the WhatsApp groups with the mums at school, and it can sometimes be that you've got to portray yourself as we've got all our stuff together and everything's okay.
It's parenting Olympics, isn't it?
And it's such a toxic.
It's dangerous. It's a really dangerous environment. I think where even if other people aren't judging you, you're judging yourself against other people as a parent, and you feel like you're not coping and everyone else is coping, and you don't want to be judged. You don't want to feel like you're failing your children. You don't want to feel like you can't cope with everything that you need to cope with. And I think I say women, but because it's majority women who stay home with their kids, they think that they've got to raise the babies and keep on top of the laundry and have a sparkling clean house and, produce a Michelin star meal every night before their other half gets home, and, teach the kids, British Sign Language and all the rest of it by the end of the day, and walk the dog and cut the grass and whatever it is. And actually you don't have to do any of those things. And it's about learning that you don't have to do any of those things. That actually, if you get up in the morning and you manage to keep all the kids alive all day and everybody goes to bed happy, then that's enough.
It's such a powerful narrative to talk about, because I completely agree, and I'd love you to chat to Kelly more about that, because I remember especially at those early stages, she would constantly criticise herself, and like you said, I'm just not doing enough.
Good enough.
And again, like we've, I guess, we've got quite a nice little community in Saltdean, and it's lovely, but we haven't got a family network necessarily down here, because everyone's back up in Essex still. So it was a really difficult, and I was out working a lot, so the nature of the business I do out of an evening, so I went through a really tough time. So for you to create something along those lines, it's like I say, firsthand I could see how much that would have been needed, I guess, even in sort of Brighton. But how has it grown from? So talk to me about what sort of things do you do within the community?
So I remember the day when somebody invited one of their friends into our group, and I saw the request come through, and my initial reaction was, how dare you? How dare you invite someone into our private sanctuary that I've created? And about 5 seconds later, I thought, actually, how nice is that, that you think so much of this group that you want to invite other people in to benefit from it. And then it just kind of grew from there. So people would invite people that they knew. We'd talk about things that were, topical, meaningful. Maybe it was something like, is it stripy jumper day on Monday at school? Or, deeper things like, I'm home with my 2-week-old baby. I can't even go to the toilet. The baby won't stop crying. I haven't had a shower in 3 days. And it's just overwhelming, and I hate my life. And you're supposed to be joyful, and you're supposed to be happy, and you're supposed to bond with your baby straight away, because that's what the media tells you, that's what television tells you. But actually, I don't feel that way. And to have other people come and say, I don't feel that way either. And it's so, it's just liberating, because you release all of that guilt, because, as a parent, your whole life is dominated by guilt. You're either not doing enough, or you're not doing the right things, or you're not, it's just guilt. It's guilt driven, and it shouldn't be that way. So once people started joining the community, it gained momentum quite quickly. We had to take on a moderator after a year to help me, because it was getting too busy. And then it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And so fast forward, 11 years, maybe nearly 12 years, have a team of 5 moderators that help in the background. And I think right from the beginning, I've always been really clear, because I skipped out a bit earlier, but I have a long history of working in social media. So I started working, and when my daughter was just 6 months old, I started working for a social media agency in Brighton. Brighton is late now, in London. And I was there for 9.5 years while she was little, and I had my other 2 children. And what I learned during that time was about people's behavior online, how they talk to one another, what's important to them. I worked on a variety of different accounts. I worked for a lot of charities. I worked for a lot of retailers. But it was all to do with user-generated content. So what people write when they're online, what people write when people aren't watching them. And I learned a lot from that. So a lot of the lessons that I learned from that, and the sort of guidelines that were put in place, I carried over to my community. So from the beginning, it's been about keeping it nice, keeping it respectful, keeping it non-judgmental, keeping it a safe space for people to come and share their stories, share their problems, ask for help, in an environment where there is no danger of negative repercussion. And so that's always been really fundamental in the beginning, putting those boundaries in place and making it safe, and where people don't conform, and I use that word carefully, but where they don't conform, they're not invited to stay. Because if you're vulnerable and you're in an environment like that, and you feel like you can't share because people will react negatively or not be supportive, then you're not going to share, and then then it's pointless.
Then you're just back into the WhatsApp groups with
absolutely.
My son or daughter's done X, Y, and Z. They got this in the test, and they starve at a week and all that. And I'm not trying to say that that's so negative that you should celebrate when your kids do well, of course, but there's certain environments that you can do it, and I think that sort of one-upmanship
just makes people feel bad. It's lovely. You're right. It is lovely to celebrate your children's achievements, but I think there is a way that you can do it where it's not negatively impacting other people. I had a child who tried her hardest every single day of her life, all the way through school, and didn't win the awards, and didn't get nominated for Star of the Week, and didn't get to bring the class hamster home, and all of those things. She didn't get it because she didn't meet the expectations that were set by children who were more able than her in certain areas. And so for her, it was devastating, to hear other people had, got Star of the Week for the 5th time this year, or whatever it was, and she didn't. So it's a really difficult one. And even within your family unit, we have 3 very different children, and differently abled children as well. And you have to be really mindful of how you celebrate each one of their achievements in front of the other one, because it's delicate. It's and I think celebrating enough for the person who is being celebrated, but not too much so you're hurting the person that isn't being celebrated. It's a fine balance.
It really is. And we constantly question, because obviously, again, having twins, you've got there's a constant comparison.
Yeah,
they're
of
there
course.
together. They're doing at the same age, again to the same. And I talked about it recently on one of the podcasts. I think that Sienna's very much like Kelly. She's very academic. She'll read. You get up in the morning, she's reading. She's sitting down, she's reading. She comes home from school, she's walking along the street reading. Like, she loves it. So and I love that, obviously. But we've been contacted about Lucas, saying, he's a little bit behind in it. I'm not. I just don't think he just doesn't engage necessarily the way that she does in school.
Maybe he just doesn't like reading.
Yeah, and
that's okay.
But that's what I mean. That for me,
Yeah.
I got a little bit frustrated because I wasn't overly academic. I'd done okay at school. I wasn't overly academic, and I just think not because he didn't do great in his SATs, which he'd been tested at 7 years old, which blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's just, I think there's that element that, of course, we want to go, well done, Sienna, that's great, you've got to start, you keep reading, you're doing really well. But that he's being labelled at 7 years old, I was a little bit behind. And that's that negative mindset that's going into him. Frustrates me. So I'm like, no, he's just not engaging right now with how they're teaching or what the curriculum that he's going down. And I think, like you said, there's that balance that you've got as a parent. It's like exactly what you're saying. There's that balance that you've got to try and get right, which is tricky.
It is really hard, and I think as an outsider, when you look in on that situation, it's really easy to say, well, that's not fair. The person who is being celebrated should have every right to be celebrated, and actually, the other person just needs to suck it up. But in reality, sometimes it's not possible for them to do that, and there are so many other aspects to consider as well, and you need to consider how damaging that might be for your other little person in the long term. And now in my 40s, I recognize how much I'm dealing with now that started when I was a child. And I think many of us do that. We, you go through your childhood, and then your teens, and then your 20s and your 30s, and then you spend your 40s in therapy fixing all the things that happened before. So I'm really conscious of that when I'm with my kids.
Okay, so you sort of touched on it there. Do you look back at, from where you are now, are you looking back at your childhood and questioning a lot of those things that happened to you and stuff now, and does that shape how you as a parent are as well?
100%.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. I can say in all honesty that as a parent, I don't always get it right. None of us do.
No.
But I wake up every single day and I try my best. I really do try my best. I try to be a mindful parent. I try to think through everything that I say and everything that I do and the way that I interact with my kids, because I'm fully aware of the impact that it has on your mental health long term. And so much damage can be caused so easily. So for me, I try to parent purposefully for that reason, because my childhood was awful, really awful. And so I parent in the opposite way to what my parents did.
That's again, I alluded a bit earlier, I guess, when sort of talking with Rachel, that we've got choices in life, aren't we? We can become, a product of our environment. So you brought up in that way, so you then carry on that journey with your kids and go along that, or you break that mold and go, I'm not going down that route.
I choose something else.
Do this, and this is, I'm not going to make those mistakes, so I'm not going to do it. And you learn from that experience, and that's such an amazing, I guess, an amazing thing to be able to do, because like I said, I do believe we'll have a choice at some point, but that is sometimes for circumstances push us in that direction, that's all we know, so that's how we do it. But to hear you talk about it and check in with yourself and think, I'm going to be the opposite to that, and I'm going to give my kids an amazing life and be there for them and love them. It's an amazing thing.
It's not always easy, and I don't always get it right. And I think your kids, as a parent, your kids have an amazing ability to hold a big mirror up to you and show you exactly who you are as a person. And sometimes I open my mouth and my mother's voice comes out, and those aren't great moments. But I also think you need to learn that it's okay to apologize to your children, and it's important to apologize to your children if you have been, unfair or unjust or impatient with a decision based on limited facts, it's important to say sorry, because not only are you acknowledging your, mistake, error, whatever you want to call it, you're teaching them humility, and you're teaching them that actually it's okay to mess up sometimes, as long as you recognize it, and it's how you fix it that's important.
I completely agree with you, and I try. I don't always get it right, but certainly try and have those levels of communication with the kids, and go, actually, I'm really sorry, Daddy's done wrong there. I've made a mistake, or whatever that looks.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to do that. I'll
Definitely.
But I want to with the community side of things. I really want to, because it's something again that I said I'm so passionate about. What would you believe is the key to building that the staggering numbers of building that community of what you have done in the last 11 years? But what do you think is the key to building such a strong community? Yeah.
I thought hard about this when you sent the question before, and I think for me the first one is really understanding who your audience is, and really, really, really understanding who they are, not understanding who you think they are. The second thing is, I think it's important to be authentic and bring your authentic self. If you're going to do it properly. And I think for a community to really work, it has to be value driven. So based on values, and stick to your values as well. Don't be, distracted by shiny objects. But yeah, I think those are the key ingredients for me, and what that has done for me and what that continues to do is build and maintain a really loyal audience, one that sticks with you, one that engages with you, because there's a difference between an engaging audience and one that engages with you. Those are two different things. But yeah, I'd say those are probably the key elements for me.
I do love it, because I do, like I said, I think certainly from an engagement point of view, it's fine to maybe go, we've got this amount of numbers in our community, but actually only that amount of people actually engage with us. So like you said, that it can, on the face of things, sometimes things can look nice and shiny, and we've got all this thing, but
don't be dazzled by the numbers, because they're less meaningful than the impact your content has. And for me, words are really powerful, and you have to be really careful how you use them, because they have the ability to do really great things, and they have the ability to cause a lot of damage. So use them carefully.
I guess one thing I want to really want to take from that is, I think I always go back to the whole culture side of stuff, and I think if you've got, same within a business or home life, whatever it is, if you create a strong culture within that company, you've got some values there, and you stick to them. So what I found fascinating, what you mentioned earlier about, if someone comes into the community, we could take everyone in, all come in, our numbers go up, and we're 50,000 members, but actually, you've come in and had a negative impact on that, and whereas if you've got those core values and that culture, I guess like in a company, that's and you stick to those, it will grow organically, and it will
but more importantly, it'll grow with the right people, because not everybody is your person, and that's okay. You're not going to be everyone's person, and they're not going to be yours. Some people may look at our community and say, wow, you've been going 11, 12 years and you've only got 20,000 people in your community. And yes, I may only have 20,000 in the community, but they are the right people for that community. They're the people who, have values that are aligned to ours. They speak to people respectfully. They're engaging. They're supportive. They're non-judgmental. They're inclusive. They're kind. That really came out in the pandemic. Really, I just saw such amazing humanity come out in the community, with offers of support. It was the first place. I mean, I get this all the time. I met somebody in a co-working space one day, and I introduced myself, and she said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I do this and that, and I have this community online. And she said, oh, what's the community? And I said, it's Worthing Mums and Dads. And she started crying, and she hugged me, and she grabbed me, and she was squeezing me, and she was crying all over me, which made me cry. And then she said, I'm so sorry. She said, I feel like I'm meeting a celebrity. And I said, that's absolutely ridiculous. And she said, your community is the first thing I look at when I wake up in the morning. It's the first thing I look at. When we moved to the area with very young children, we felt lost. We felt like aliens that had landed on the moon. And your community created a sense of belonging for us. It was a place where we could come and get advice, where to find a nursery, which schools were the best, which area to move to. We made friends, we made real life friends from your community. We can come there and ask advice on things. We can find information about, holiday clubs or childminders or whatever it is. And she said, every single day when I wake up, your community is the first thing I look at when I open my eyes. And that was really, really moving.
Wow, absolutely. As you're talking to me about, for me, running a business, a community, whatever it is you do, we want to try and do things with some validation. And again, you heard me talk about it earlier about how we measure success, and that there's so much that narrative out there about measuring success on what financial gain people have. But listening to stories like that, for me, that's success. That is where true success lies, in those relationships you've forged or spaces that you've created for people to be able to forge those relationships.
A lifeline for some people. And especially since Facebook changed and in groups you have the option to post anonymously, that has opened up so many doors for people who are in very vulnerable situations, people going through domestic violence, people going through marriage breakdowns, people going through, horrific experiences with their children. They can come there and they can be vulnerable and they can be honest and they can, seek advice, and they can be very, very clear on, what it is that they're struggling with, and they can be open and honest without any fear of any comeback from anybody. And that's what that community provides.
Such an amazing thing. I'm really intrigued, actually. I just want to delve in a little bit, looking at you listen to your childhood and I guess the negative experience you've had from that, to come in and be a mother figure or created something like this, where you built something where you want to share love, and that's such an amazing turnaround. I'm just keen. Is it like you talked about the inspiration behind it earlier, of that obviously it was a need, there was a problem there, but when you analyse it and look into it, do you think it goes deeper than that there was from that negative in your childhood, that's why you've created this? And really,
definitely, I didn't know it at the time, I do now. But yeah, definitely, I crave love all the time. I love loving and I love being loved, and I say I'm fortunate. I'm not fortunate, and I'll kind of validate that in a second, but I'm fortunate enough to be extremely loved. I'm in a wonderful marriage with a man who adores me, and I'm really grateful for that. I have a wonderful relationship with my children. Not every day, I've got 3 teens in the house, so it's hard, but fundamentally, it's brilliant. The relationships that I have with my friends, my circle of friends, I've had for many, many, many years, the vast majority of them more than 10, 15 years. And they're the type of friendships where if they called one day and said, I need a kidney, you'd be like, where do I need to be at what time? Those. And I love that. I love that feeling. I think that's all you have at the end of your life. You can be as successful as you want, whatever that looks like for you. You can make all the money in the world if that's what motivates you. But at the end of your life, when you have nothing, all you have is love, and all you have is the relationships with the people in your life that you've built over that time. And that's it. All the money in the world is not going to help you at that point. So for me, that's my focus.
It's a beautiful thing to say, and so relevant, I think, and so I run a podcast and I talk to various different entrepreneurs, business owners, and look at Giles on earlier, just sold for $450 million or whatever that looks like, and I'm always been a very ambitious person, I think, and I'm on a bit of a journey, I think, of self-discovery, really, for myself. Hence, this is the cathartic therapy of the podcast that I run, I guess, because I'm constantly asking these type of questions. And I always ask about success and what that looks like. But actually, what we're really searching for is love and happiness.
Yeah.
And I'm just questioning a lot about, I guess, myself at the moment, and the paths I'm on and the journeys I'm going on. And I look around and I think, I go back to the time when I was 40, which I've shared a couple of times on the podcast, where I was really low point and felt really down because I hadn't achieved stuff, and etc. etc. But then, if I died tomorrow, I was surrounded by actually people who loved me, and
Yeah.
like family were here tonight, and people in the business community who support me and so loving towards me. And I've got the same as you. I've got friends who I've grown up with actually who do exactly that. They die for me the next day, and that, God, if I measured my success based on the relationships I've built, well, I'm doing all right, and I'm okay with that. I think that's,
Yeah.
and there's the other part of me that's torn with this. Do I need to achieve something else? And there's a real mixture there. And what I actually want to be is this person here where we're just discussing again. I'm really content and happy with that, and fighting off this other thing on my shoulder going, you know, you need to still do more. You need to prove something to, whether it's myself or someone else, I don't know.
Maybe you're setting, no, I get it. And maybe you're setting your goals by other people's expectations or other people's perception of what success means. And what success means, I mean, listening to Giles and Rachel earlier was amazing. I mean, really amazing. But with the greatest respect to Giles, I couldn't think of anything worse than having a company with 500 people. The immense responsibility of that would actually probably kill me. 450 million pounds, it sounds great. No, thank you. No, thank you. Not for me. It's not that I don't think money is great. I think money is amazing. You can do brilliant things with money. You can change lives with money. It's, it's not a dirty word. Money is great. It's not what motivates me. It doesn't mean I don't need money. Everyone needs money, but it's not the driving force for me. And I think, for you need to set your goals by your standards and by your values and what's important to you, and try not to focus on, how other people measure it. And if making money or an amount of money, whatever that figure is actually not the driving force for you, if the driving force is spending more time with the people you love, or, doing good, creating good in the world, then do that.
Yeah. That's great advice. I love it. Thank you. Just before we come towards a couple of little bits towards the end, just talk to me about some of the, again, challenges in your personal life, but through challenges through running business journeys and in the social media world and your career. Talk to me about some of the challenges that you faced over your career.
So there's been loads. So also in 2012, same year, I started a business. So at the same time that I started a community. The reason I started the business was because as a mother with 3 children, 6, 4 and 2, I was completely unemployable. My daughter had hospital appointments all the time. I needed, complete flexibility in terms of when I needed to pop out during the day to take her here, there and everywhere. And it wasn't possible to find an employer that would be that accommodating, So that's why I started the business. I started it to service a need. So I found it was an educational travel business. I identified a need or a gap in the market, let's call it that. And I did a lot of research. So a lot of research into what those clients wanted, what they needed, what their pain points were, who they were, how much disposable income they had, where I could, position myself within the market. So that went on probably nearly for about a year before the business really kind of took off. The first year we did a few test cases. My main market was in northern Italy. So I used to bring clients over from Italy to the UK. And we sort of tweaked a little bit here and there, and we created an offer that was amazing. It was an amazing offer. There was nobody else who offered anything at the standard that we did, and so we were able to charge a premium price for what we did. So from the first year to the second year, we had I think it was a 95% return rate on clients, and then the year after that, we had a 65% return of the original clients came back again for that year, and so on and so on. So within about, I can't remember the numbers because it's ages ago, but probably about year 4, we were turning over 6 figures from a little tiny seasonal business that started off from my kitchen table. And it turned into a really successful business. It was tiring, but it ticked lots of boxes for me in terms of fulfillment and challenge. And actually most days in the beginning were really challenging. And, I didn't go to university. I didn't go to business school. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have parents who had their own businesses. So every day was learning, learning. And some days you messed up and some days were great. And some days you spent money on stuff you shouldn't have spent money on. But it was good. It was a business that I was really proud of. And then 2020 came. And in February 2020, COVID hit Northern Italy, which was my client base. And so by the beginning of March, I knew that my business was going to die. And it was just a case of how long I was going to keep it on life support. So, yeah, I'd say 2020 to 2021 was a very difficult year for me. That was 2 seasons for us. So 2020 was one season, 2021 was another season. We got some grants from the government, which was great. We changed the business model to an online business model as much as we could. But then when I sort of sat down and looked at it, it wasn't the business I started. It wasn't the business I created. It wasn't what I loved. I was doing something as a kind of runner-up, and I didn't love it. And so when we were looking at a third season, again, that was severely impacted. I sat down with my husband and just said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done, and that's okay. And that was tough. It was tough to give up something that I'd spent 10 years building.
Yeah, that is really tough. But getting to that point, I guess, obviously we know that good mutual friend of ours, Jeremy Jacobs, obviously took similar just after lockdown, sort of had to do that. But it's a brave thing to be able to do, isn't it? Recognise when something actually when you look at it, no fault of your own, like, how do you? How many people I spoke to on here and you go, plan and do this. Who had global pandemic?
You can't plan for that. Exactly. No, so you can't.
That's something completely out of your control. But how do you view the business then? Now, do you look back on it fondly that I've grew something great and it got to a point that just couldn't go on anymore, and that's a chapter that you've closed the book on, and you're okay with that? Or
I am now. I'm really okay with it now.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the beginning. I think it was like somebody died, and it was unexpected. It was shock. I hope you've never dealt with grief, but if you have, it's that you go through the stages of grief. There's, first the shock, then there's the disbelief, then there's the bargaining. You want to bargain with it. Then there's acceptance, and then there's, sorrow and grieving. And you go through all of those processes when your business dies, in the way that mine died, because it's unexpected. So it was hard. It was hard in the beginning. There was a lot of shame around it, huge amounts of shame. There was a lot of.
So did you feel like it failed then?
Yeah, totally responsible. Even though, you look back now and you say, of course I wasn't responsible. I didn't create COVID, but you feel responsible because you've let so many people down. You've let so many people down. The situation has let so many people down. But it was also, it was difficult. It was a difficult time because my clients reacted very badly. Understandably, some of them got very nasty, some of them threatened legal action. So on top of the trauma of losing the business, I had to then fight with my clients, and that again was unexpected and very difficult and very expensive. So yeah, it was hard in the beginning, but now I see that actually it was necessary for that to happen, because if I was really honest, I'd fallen out of love with the business a couple of years before that, but I would have stayed out of obligation, out of a sense of duty, because you don't want to let people down. So this forced me to make a decision that actually was the right decision for me. Yeah.
That's great. I think so. Tell me then, where you are, because obviously we met. You was at obviously at Freedom Works for a bit, and now talk to me about now and the future for you.
Well, it's a difficult one. I've actually gone back into employment for the first time in over 10 years, and there's a number of reasons for that. One, my kids are so much older and they don't need me to be around as much as they did when they were younger. Two, it was, I think, about financial stability. So I think, having gone through so much trauma financially, and when we closed the business, we had to sell our house, and that was really crappy. Yeah, we had to sell our house that had been our home, the only home that our children had known. their whole lives. And it was beautiful. We'd made the most beautiful, beautiful home for them. And then we had to tell them we were moving. And that was hard. And I think all of the kind of stress and anxiety around money was so overwhelming that actually for me to go back into employment is such a relief. And it's great, actually. It's challenging. It's busy. And I'm, got a lot to learn, but I've gone back into an industry that I worked in 20 years ago, and it actually feels like coming home. It's quite nice. Yeah.
I didn't realise that about the house as well, and because it's tough. We had to, when I shut the salon, we had to sell we had 2 properties at a time, a flat we'd had for many years, but a home that we had, and we ended up selling a house. And it's, again, I look back at those times, and I felt like I'd failed.
You do.
You feel like you let people down. Kelly had not made that decision to start a business and had to sell a property and rent them for a long period of time after. But
that's rubbish.
What's your mindset like around that at that moment where you got to sit down with your husband and say, look, I'm closing the business and this is what's happening, and then you have to sell the house and stuff like that? Where's your headspace at that?
It comes back to shame again. You feel so ashamed. I felt so ashamed that I had failed. There's a lot of negative self-talk that went on. So it was all around disappointment, about failure, about shame, about guilt, about not being able to forgive yourself. And actually, none of those things help you. None of those feelings serve you. And, as Rachel was saying earlier tonight, you allow yourself to wallow for a period of time. And I did. I had a really good go at it. And then one day you're just like, okay, enough. Like we've felt sad, we've cried, we've had a complete breakdown about it. And now we need to move forward because this is not serving us as a family. It was hard for my kids, really hard. And even now, I feel great now, and personally, I can say, I drive past the house. It's in the same town that we live in. I drive past it, and I feel nothing. I don't feel sad. I don't feel, I wish we were still there. I feel nothing. There's no emotion. I love our home. Our new home is lovely. It's much smaller than the old one, but actually, I feel more connected to my kids, and as a family, I think we're more connected because we're forced to be in a smaller space together. Whereas before, the other house was too big. And it got to the point where, the kids would disappear off into their rooms and we couldn't see them, we couldn't hear them. So it's really changed our family dynamic. And I love it. I love where we are.
Amazing. Leigh, thank you, for sharing your whole story so openly and honestly with me. And it's so inspiring to listen to you. And when you meet people and you have a connection, you think, just for the first time I met you, I felt that way. And listening to your story in more depth and just makes me love you even more. Honestly,
you're completely mutual.
You're an amazing person. You really are. And I think what you've actually. Looking at all, like you said, talk about failure and them things, but looking at what you've created with the Worthy Mums and Dads alone, for me, and listening to nothing to do with financial and other success, what the purpose and what you've achieved with that is far outweighs anything when it comes to money and financial success. That for me is true success.
Thank you.
And that's an amazing thing to be really, really proud of. And amazing. Well, look, we're gonna finish up as always with our quick fire questions.
Ready.
You know about. So look, what one piece of advice do you give to your 18-year-old self?
Wait, because what you're experiencing now is not how it's always going to be.
Who's been your biggest inspiration throughout your life and why?
I think every woman who has ever started a business while holding a baby on her hip and cooking a roast dinner and making Halloween costumes and baking a birthday cake all at the same time.
Absolutely love that. Could you recommend a book or a podcast for your listeners that's had an
Yes.
impact on you?
There's a theme here. I love women, and I think women are amazing, and I think they're resilient and strong and brilliant and capable of so much more than they think they are. So for me, there's a podcast. It's very American, but there's a lady called Tracy Litt, and she does a podcast called "What Would She Do?" And for women, it's brilliant. It just taps into all of those feelings of insecurity or not enoughness, or and she's really, really direct about how she talks about it, and it's about learning to accept yourself and learning to be kind to yourself and learning to put tools in place to help you feel better about you and about the work that you're doing. So that's one. Books, I loved Shoe Dog, Story of Nike. I loved it. I thought it was beautifully written and a real story of bravery and a bit of winging it, and a lot of hard work. I love that one. And I think for anyone starting out in business, I would recommend Profit First. It's an amazing book. It's so simple by the time, and even the author says this, by the time you get sort of 20 pages in, he's already told you the punchline, but then he goes into more depth later in the book, and it's all about, with your financials of your business, putting your profit aside first before you pay anyone else, before you pay your suppliers, before you pay anybody. You put your profit in a separate account first, and it's about segmenting those pots of money so that when you get to the end of the month, you don't go, oh, there's no money left for me. Yeah, it's a good one.
That's interesting. I'll definitely look out. Thank you. Well, look, final one. What's your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
Surround yourself with positive people, and it's okay to have a culling exercise every now and then to remove negative people from your life.
Our previous guest, Matt Turner. Do you know Matt from Creative Pod?
I don't think so.
We talked about this very subject about toxic people. He's quite funny. He said exactly that about having a cull.
Yeah.
Every year.
I do 12 months. Me too. Yeah, 12-month cull. I think when I was 27, I came out of a really, really destructive relationship. And I moved house, and I changed jobs, and I changed my mobile number. And those people that I didn't want in my life, I just didn't tell them I was moving. And it was the single most cathartic thing I have ever done in my life, because it gave me an opportunity to completely reset and to then forge my life in a way that I wanted to, with only the positive people that I wanted in it.
Love that.
Brutal, but effective.
Yeah. He goes to his offices and he's got a sign on the wall that says no tickets.
Yeah.
And that is exactly his mate. He said,
yeah,
I won't work with them, I won't employ them, I won't have them in my life, no clients, anything, and that's it.
Good for him.
He does. He goes
words really to live by, definitely. Thank you for having me.
It's been amazing. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you,
Sam. And that, as they say, is a wrap.
For now.
For now.